This exercise, we're going to explore lighting basics in Lightwave. I've gone ahead and opened up one character. This character's name is Stu, and I put him inside of a box with three sides removed. So there's no ceiling, there's no right or front side. I've got two windows open. One perspective view with texture shaded solid set up, and then VPR mode over here so we can see the results of what we do with these lights. By default, every Lightwave scene file comes with one light. You always have to have at least one light in your scene. To access the light properties, you click on the light button at the bottom here next to your cameras and you hit the P key or the properties button. This brings up your render globals, which we've seen before. But instead of using the cameras tab or the output tab, we're using the lights tab. It tells me that I have one light in my scene, and I can have as many lights in my scene if I want. We'll talk about adding lights later on, but for now, know that you can clear all the lights at any given time, and that your settings for your lights are right here in the middle of this window and below. This top section, this is very confusing to new Lightwave users. Please ignore this. Please ignore anything with the word ambient on it. What this does is it gives you a quick and down and dirty way to add some artificial illumination to your scene for practical reasons, but it does not look aesthetically pleasing, and I typically turn this off to 0 or leave it to the default at 5. It doesn't really do much damage there. Forget about the color, forget about the intensity, just let it go. Forget about this part. Alright, so what we want to focus on is here. This controls the light. So right now, every Lightwave scene comes with one light, and that light is always by default set up to be a distant light. But there are multiple light types. There's an area light, linear, etc., and we're going to go through some of these right now. But distant light, let's start with that one since that's the default. You can change the color, you can change the intensity. I can use the slider to drop it down to 0, so it's turned off, or 100% where it's regular illumination comes through at full illumination. But I can go beyond 100%. I can go to 900 and overexpose my scene if I want to. More on that later, but this is the basic controls for you have for a distant light. Not a whole lot of options. A distant light is what we call an infinite light source, meaning that if I move it up or out, let me just sort of do this so you can see. I'm going to target the light and move it up. As I move it up higher and higher, look at my VPR mode. Nothing changes. The light intensity of 100 does not diminish. It simply doesn't change. But if I were to hit the Y key to rotate the light, I can change the direction of the shadows, of the shadows being cast by the wall, the shadows being cast by Stu on the floor. And you notice the quality of the shadows is very sharp, very harsh. And this is the way that distant lights light a scene. They're infinite, they're handy for certain situations, but this is how they operate. They're infinite in that they do not diminish according to distance. Put this back where it was. This could be underneath. It really doesn't matter where this light is. All that matters is the rotation of the light. That's what matters with a distant light. Alright, at the bottom portion we have 3 tabs, Basic, Shadows, and Objects. Starting with objects, I can choose to light or not light any individual object in my scene. So for example, I can exclude Stu and not light him at all by clicking on this. Now Stu goes dark in VPR mode. And I can exclude the scene, and now Stu is only lit and not the background. So this is pretty self-explanatory, but very, very useful as we go about lighting our scenes with multiple lights, because we don't want to have too many shadows, don't want to have too many lights going on for everything. We just want our lights to target certain elements only. So we'll use this to our advantage. Shadows can be turned off. If you don't want shadows at all, I can turn them off. Stu no longer cast shadows. But ray trace is typically the default, what you want. Depending on the light, again, you may want to turn off the shadows of certain lights if it's too distracting. You can do that. You can change the color of a shadow. If you want them to be blue, you can make blue shadows. There you go. Alright, I'm sorry I'm going through this pretty quick, but this is not the most important stuff. I want to make sure that it's covered, but alright. Lens flare and volumetric lighting, very cool, very interesting effects. We'll tackle these at a later time. They are a big can of worms that we're not going to open on this lesson. These checkboxes simply allow you to disable surface features that we looked at in the Surfacing Basics panel according to specific light. Say, for example, you didn't want this light to affect Stu's diffuse properties on his surface. Well, you can turn it off. As we know, diffuse scatters light, and so when you turn that off, it makes everything pretty much dark, both the background and Stu, but it's possible. Specular highlights, this might be more practical. I can turn off the shiniest of those specular highlights all in one click. So anyway, I will point out that VPR mode, if you are forgetting, VPR mode is what allows me to see the results of shadows. And you notice over here, you see nothing. This is great for maneuvering because I can't see in VPR mode. I can't see my lighting icons or my camera, but I can see the result of what the lights do. So let's move on. So that's a distant light. Let's talk about its complete opposite, the point light. The point light looks like this, looks different physically. You notice it looks like kind of a star. And it's basically a light bulb. Okay, so I can spin this all day long and nothing's going to change. You notice my VPR mode, Stu does not change. I can spin it on the bank or heading or whatever. But if I move it, that's where we see change. You notice there, well, I get these dramatic shadows being cast by this point light. They're still sharp shadows. They're not soft, as we'll see is possible with some other lights. But yeah, I would say it's pretty much the exact opposite of the distant light. It gives you sharp edge shadows, but it is not affected by the rotate tool. It is affected by the move tool. One other big difference is that it is not an infinite light source. Like other lights that we can choose, it has an intensity fall off. And you see that's new to us. So if I turn this from off to linear, what I get is a distance. And this little distance is represented by this dotted circle. So it's very small in this case, but if I were for example, to move this closer to Stu, you can see I'm lighting just his hand with it. It's that focused, so I can kind of move this along his body. Let's go a little wider. That's a little too focused. Let's try maybe, I don't know, 3 meters. And that gives us a little wider circle, as you can see over here. Bigger sphere of influence will make it a little bit easier to cast some light onto Stu's front or back. There's Stu's face, looking pretty eerie there. And let's increase this even more. 15. Look at that. Wow. So much bigger sphere, but now we're getting these really interesting ring of light on the floor, but we can't see, notice the background. We can't see the stage that we saw before. So anyway, that is linear fall off in a nutshell. Pretty simple. It's a very realistic effect. It's very dramatic. I highly recommend using it when you can, but just for you novice users out there, which pertains to most everybody, I guess, at this point, be aware it can confuse you if you're not paying attention. But I think you should be encouraged to use it. It's a very believable, realistic, and powerful tool. Okay, that is the point light. Let's move forward. The spherical light is, again, I'd say a close cousin in this case of the point light. It's got a distance range, so you can use the intensity fall off. So I can increase the sphere, decrease it. So you notice nothing much changed when I switched over to spherical. I can position this ball of light wherever I'd like it to go. The big key difference is this panel down here, size. I can change the size of this light. Why would I want to do that? Well, I'll show you what this does. So when I change from a small size to a big size, let's go with like 5 millimeters, I get one particular type of shadow, but let's go large with it. Let's try like 20 meters. Now you can see the ball is visible. This is the range of influence, but this is the ball itself. Okay, so if I were to move this back a little bit, let me select the ball. There it is. And there's my light source. You can see the quality of the shadows is very different. This one, the larger the light source, the more dispersed these shadows become and the softer the quality of the light. It's really quite interesting. Let me go ahead and turn off the linear effect so you can see what I'm talking about. So maybe I went too big with this. Let's try like 10 meters maybe. There's something more manageable. But look at the difference. Let's look at the shadows on this type of light compared to what we saw with the point light. Maybe I'll go a little smaller on this. Let's try 5 meters. That's better. Okay. Can you see those shadows? I'm hoping out there. There it is. See that shadow that Stu is casting? Very different look than what we saw with the point light. Let's go back to the point light. See that sharp, harsh shadow that looks very unpleasing to the eye? Well, the spherical light gives you a much nicer quality to it. And the smaller the size of the spherical light, you notice it's really tiny here at 100 millimeters, the sharper that shadow will become. The larger we go with it, the softer that shadow. So there's 5 meters, and well, I'll just use the slider, it's a little bit easier. I can kind of grow the size, and as it grows, so does the type of shadow that it casts, the type of lighting that you get. It seems to change instantly. It will take longer to render these complex, softer shadows. You notice it's not just the shadow on the floor, but also the shadows affecting Stu's body. So it gives you a very different feel, because, you know, lights are a combination of the light itself and the shadows that they create. That's what we take away from lighting. So shadows are a big part of it. Alright, so that's spherical light. It's a big ball. What should I do next? Let's go to area light. This is one of my favorites. Area light gives you a really interesting quality of shadow. But the other thing I should point out to you with the area light is that unlike the previous lights we've looked at where they're not affected by one aspect, either, you know, position or rotation, this one's affected by pretty much everything. So if I position the light, that affects the shadow. If I rotate the light, that affects the shadow. Well, let me get a better, grab the handle there. Okay, so that affects the projection of the light. You can see the shadows there on the walls being affected. So on top of that, you can also go to modify, and this is unique. You can use the size tool to scale the light and make it bigger. Now, this is similar to what we saw with the spherical light a moment ago, but the difference is I'm using the actual size tool to do it, and the results of the shadow are quite similar in that they become more dispersed the larger it gets, and more focused the smaller the light source. But similar quality. So I would say, you know, again, this would be a good close cousin of the sphere, but not so close to the point light. This also has an intensity fall off that we can set up. You've already seen that, so I won't bother with it, but yeah, very controllable light source with beautiful shadows. As you can see, the shape represents kind of like a window. Similar also if you're a photographer to a bounce card, if you've ever worked with one of those. All right, let's move on to the spotlight. Another highly controlled light source, probably more controllable than any other, but has its own unique characteristics. So let's look at what the spotlight can do that no other light can do. First off, like the area light, it is adjustable in terms of position and rotation both. And if any light is made better by the light view, then I don't know which one it would be. This is the perfect light to use with the light view, so I'm going to do that now. I'm actually looking through the spotlight. So if I have the Y key pressed and I rotate, I'm actually rotating as I look through the light. So it's almost like I'm there behind the light in real life, positioning it, rotating it around, and you can see there it casts a spotlight on the floor and on Stu. If you look in VPR mode as I do this, interesting. I can move it as well. I can move physically the light, so it's sliding along the floor here and aiming it at Stu. Alright, this also has the ability to have an intensity fall off, which we can adjust. So we can project this outward and have the fall off range change. So if I want to go to perspective view, I can see how this light is interacting with Stu at this point. Now at the bottom, there are several unique features that can only be done with the spotlight. First off, the cone angle, because it is a spotlight, it has a cone. And so we can focus this cone so it's very tight or expand it so it's very wide. You can see, hopefully you're looking to my left on the perspective view as to what that looks like, as well as the VPR mode, the results, just kind of doing this a few times for you. Let's switch this perspective view over to light view and see how that looks when you adjust the cone angle. There's a wide angle, so I'm really flooded the cone, and now I'm going really tight with the cone, so it's just on Stu and not the floor. So as you can see, it's very adjustable. I can really get this focused so it's only on Stu's belly button if I want. Alright, so on top of that you have an edge angle, a soft edge angle. So what is that? Let me go focus again, and let's adjust this. And you can see that there is a no fall off at this point, just a sharp edge, very direct, or I can go all the way up and soften it. Depending upon what your cone angle is, that's kind of the maximum. So if I go wider, I can go wider here as well on the softening. So I'm able to get a more gradual fall off here than I would without it. So let's just change this back to none. You can see how sharp it is. So it's like a feathering effect if you're a Photoshop user. Last but not least, I can do a projection image. I can project an actual photo through this light. And so let me just see if I can quickly come up with an image. And see if I can find like an old logo here. And here we go. So there is, let me just show you what this image looks like. I'm going to go to my image editor so you can see it. That is the image. It's just this little world premiere image graphic, and there's what it looks like when it's projected through the light. So you can see through the light view or through the perspective view. It doesn't show up through perspective view, it shows up through light view, but it does show up on VPR. So this is how it would actually render. So if I were to, move this light around, you can see how that's kind of like a disco light, the way it projects, or a slide projector there, video projector perhaps, onto Stu's body. Alright, so those are some of the unique features of a spotlight. Going to go back to perspective view to sort of get reoriented here a little bit. Turn this off. Okay, that is a spotlight. Next up, we're not going to get into photometric lights. I can just tell you that right now. It's way beyond the scope of this class. It's very high-end, advanced. It's something new to Lightwave, well, fairly new. It allows you to create lights that emulate real-world lights based upon profiles that you can load up. But it's great for architectural purposes and things, but I think it's way beyond the scope of what we're going to do. An N-Gon light is basically similar to an area light, but it allows you to choose the number of sides. So this happens to be a pentagon shape. As you can see, I can size it like I would an area light, but it behaves very much like an area light in the way that it casts shadows. It also has an angle feature, so we can also use that similar to what we saw. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I haven't gone over the dome light yet, so let me go over the dome light and that will explain angle. But it does affect the shadow, let me just tell you that. We'll cover that in a second. Other than that, it can be moved, it can be rotated, it is very similar to an area light. But, to be honest, I haven't found a need to use a specific shape like this. I guess for architectural situations it might be useful. For certain specifics, to have that ability to change from 8 to like an octagon or something. But in my experience, and what I've used Lightwave for, I haven't found a need for it. I just use an area light instead, but there you go. Okay, so linear lights are scalable. They are a string of point lights, essentially. So I can choose the size tool and scale them up. Again, they're great for architectural purposes, but they behave just like a point light, only they are scalable. So I can make this a very particular shape and size. And so by doing so, let's say, for example, I could create like a line of light, like a fluorescent light bulb or, some neon or something. And it does affect the type of shadows that you get, and it is a specific type of light that can be useful for certain situations. But in terms of the parameters, yes, it is basically like having a lot of point lights all in a row that you can scale. The dome light, as I was mentioning earlier, is unique. It is basically a distant light, with one key exception. Unlike the distant light, it has the ability to create very soft shadows. So let's move this light into position, or move it out of the way, I should say, and rotate it into position, because like the distant light, position doesn't affect it. One thing that I found confusing when I first started using this light is that, in my opinion, the front of the light, well, not my opinion, but in terms of the way I'm thinking, the front of the light would be this flat area, but it's not. It's the opposite. So the front of the light is actually the round area. So when I'm aiming this, when you're aiming it at something, that's what you want to keep in mind. That's how you create the light. So here I'm lighting Stu, and I have my familiar settings that you saw with the distant light. Let me go ahead and create some shadows, though. Let me rotate this and then down. Okay, so let's jump back quickly to remind ourselves a distant light. How would this look? If I have an infinite light source creating a shadow on the floor, it's very harsh, it's very direct, and again, the distance does not affect a distant light, only the rotation. Now let's switch this over to a dome light. A dome light has an angle feature, and at 90 degrees, it gives you a very, very soft, controlled shadow. So let's take this down to 0, and you'll find that, boom, it's basically a distant light. Let's go back and forth and compare it. There's your distant, there's your dome. Okay, so now if I start increasing this gradually, I can use the slider for that. Let's go back to 0 and just gradually increase it. So now I'm at 6. You can start to see a little softening in the shadow. Now I'm at 15, more softening, but you can see it takes Lightwave longer to calculate that. Even in VPR mode, it's just taking longer to figure that out. So this was an indication that it's going to also take you longer to render. So just be aware of that. The shadows look different than the area light shadows that I was getting, in that the way that they, kind of fall back away from Stu. But the quality is on par with that. The quality is very good. So if you're looking for an infinite light source that has great shadows, this is your tool. It does not size or scale like the area light. It's basically, like I said, it's the distant light, but it's controllable in terms of its rotation. So that's the way it looks. Alright, so that really covers all of the light types within Lightwave. And the next step going forward is to start to explore some of the visual effects side of what these lights can do. So the next time we look at lights, we'll talk about things like volumetric lighting and lens flares to give you some idea of how those can be implemented. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the 3-point lighting setup. how does that implemented within Lightwave, and why do we use a 3-point light setup? On top of that, which types of lights do we choose in a 3-point light setup? So now that you're familiar with all the light types and how they operate on a mechanical level, now we can start looking at the artistic side of lighting as well as some of the more advanced features. So I'll leave it here for now. This has been our introduction to the types of lights in Lightwave.